Um, can you have both live or living faith and dead faith at the same time?
At the same moment of time?
That's like this says, for example, was Rahab a harlot as she's receiving the spies and sending them out? It seems like she's got dead faith in that area, but living faith in another area. That's what they say.
Yeah. Again, Bob doesn't want responsibility for this. Neither do I. Again, I think that's asking questions that the text is not intended to answer. Because the text is trying to prove to the objector that it is possible for faith to have an obvious connection with what we do, so that it is possible to see that the faith is alive and productive. Once we begin to skate on the skateboard of theology through this passage and try to answer all our questions about it, we're going beyond, it seems to me, the intent of the passage. That is always a very dangerous exegetical procedure, to make a text answer questions it's not addressed to. Right? So that's the problem with a question like that, I think.
This one asks, if justification by works is before men, how do you explain 1 Corinthians 4, verses 2 through 4?
What are those verses?
I can't recall all of them, but that's the part I don't judge before the time. And Paul says, I'm not afraid of being judged by men, but I'm being judged, my judgment is by the Lord, and he's looking forward to the Bema. Have I paraphrased it right? Why doesn't somebody read it out there? 1 Corinthians 4, 2, 3, and 4?
I think I know what that's... But go ahead and read it, please.
Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful, but with me it is a very small thing that I should be judged of you or of man's day. Yea, I judge not my own self. For I know nothing by myself, yet am I not hereby justified, but he that judges me is the Lord.
Okay, and he goes on in that passage to say that... Judge nothing before the time when the Lord comes, who shall bring to light the hidden thoughts of the heart and make manifest the counsels of the heart and so on. I think the point here is that no one can pass definitive judgment on other people on the basis of what they do unless they have a perfect knowledge of the person's heart. I can certainly see faith manifested, but I'm not the judge of Abraham. Could he have done better than that? I don't know. God does. It's hard to see how he could have, but nevertheless, the point is that I can't pass a definitive judgment on anybody's behavior because I do not know enough about the inner life of that person. But God knows the inner life as well as the expression of that in actual deeds. But again, that's not connected particularly with this passage. The passage only wishes to prove, that was one of my major emphases this morning, the passage is only intended to prove that a person who has real faith can manifest that faith in what he does and prove that his faith is alive and productive. And if we try to make more out of it than that, in fact, my talk this morning can be summarized by saying, don't make more out of this passage than James made.
What about a passage like 1 Corinthians 3, 10 through 15, where Paul talks about the wood, the hay, and the stubble, and the gold, silver, and the precious stones, and that's looking at some things that are external, and yet it says he shall be saved, yet so as through fire. What's going on in that passage?
Well, it means, the way I read the passage, it means that even if a person's good works were entirely burned up at the judgment seat of Christ, he'd still be in heaven. I don't think that this passage proves that anyone's works will be entirely burned up, because this is a hypothetical issue for Paul. I think it would be going too far to say that he's saying that there will be people standing at the judgment seat of Christ whose every deed will be burned to a crisp. I don't think that's the intent. But his point is that if that did happen, it wouldn't affect their salvation.
And how do you take the wood, hay, stubble, and the gold, silver, precious stones? Are those good works and bad works?
In the context, it appears to me that he is talking particularly about works done professedly within the church and in service to God. And some things that we do for God have real and enduring value, and some things do not. It is possible to serve God out of bad motives, with wrong objectives, with an effort to glorify ourselves instead of God. That kind of thing would be wood, hay, and stubble.
So you wouldn't see those as bad works, just they're not permanent. There's no lasting value to those works.
Well, I don't think that, again, I think that he's describing the judgment seat of Christ, and it's clear from other passages that our whole life is reviewed. And so probably Paul would have said, yeah, your bad works, whether done in or outside the church or in or outside the ministry, are wood, hay, and stubble. I think he would probably have said that.
Okay, we have time for one or two more questions. I've got one last one here. If you've got one, write it down and pass it up. But here's this last one. The expression faith without works is dead occurs 3 times. Once outside of your passage, James 2:17, and then 20 and 26. What precisely does that expression faith without works is dead mean, and why does it occur in the preceding context too, in 2:17?
Well, I didn't say that faith without works is dead occurred only in 20 to 26. What I said was justification by works occurs only in that section. And so I'm arguing against justification by works being expanded to general lifestyle issues. But obviously, from the start of the passage in 2:14, James wants to tell his readers, if you don't act on your faith, your faith's a dead letter. It's unproductive. It's lifeless. And the objector says, how can you say that? You really can't see a connection between faith and works. And James says, oh, yes, you can see it. Look at Abraham. Look at Rahab.
So when people say faith without works is not faith, that's not at all what James is saying. He's saying faith without works is, are you saying not productive?
Yeah. We must remember that, I used the term polymorphous yesterday, which is a technical term for wide range of meanings. I think in most advanced languages, the word dead is a very, very polymorphous term. So even in English, we can think of almost off the top of our heads a series of ways in which the word dead is used, right? It's a dead letter. It's a dead end. You can think of lots and lots of others. We use the word dead both literally and metaphorically, and we use it freely. And so it should not be assumed when we come to James 2 that there's only one possible meaning for the word dead. We have to try to understand James 2 within the context and framework of James's basic argument. And so I think it would be better to say, I think we understand what we mean when we say, if Abraham doesn't do anything despite the fact that he believes that his faith is dead, we mean it doesn't have vitality, it doesn't have productivity, it doesn't act, it doesn't work. We don't mean it ain't there, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly don't mean he ain't saved. So, let's be reasonable about this. Why should we read such heavy-freighted theology into a simple metaphor? How can faith literally be dead? It can't be. You could say faith without works is not faith, but that's not what he says. Right? That's what a lot of people think he says, but he didn't say it. So let's remember the fluidity, the variability of a word like dead, and take that into account in James 2.
Okay, the final question, I'm not sure I fully understand it, so it's a risk to read it, but I'll give it a shot. And that is, you mentioned justification by works are not always visible. Some of these things you might do, and like the idea of going to the hospital with someone, and they say, if you do something that is sacrificial, but it's not observable to other people, would God look at that as some sort of vindication before Him? I mean, not in terms of eternal life, but in terms of reward?
I'm tempted to say, what has happened to me is what happens to James in this passage. I did not say that justification by works is sometimes invisible. I said faith is sometimes not visible in what we do. That's different. You understand that? It's one thing to say that faith is always visible. Faith is not always visible. But I didn't say that justification by works is sometimes invisible. No. It wouldn't be justification by works in the James's sense of the term if it were invisible.
And by the way, I didn't ask this question. I'm just reading. Okay.
You just preserved our friendship.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's give him a hand. Thanks so much.
Thank you.